So a bit of backstory before we jump into anything else. Why have I been doing so many debates with Christians? What's going on? Have I brought Christianity back from the dead just like Jesus Christ himself? No. Actually, what happened was, recently, I went viral on Twitter, again, for a very hot take of mine about Christianity. It's all because of this post right here. 1.5 million views, 1.2K responses, only 641 likes. Let me tell you something right now, okay? When you have 1.5 million views and 1,000 responses and only 600 likes, you made a banger tweet, okay? You made a phenomenal tweet. And that is this video right here. How strong does your faith have to be to pray for somebody and they can actually get better? Christianity is a huge scam because you have to believe that you're a piece of shit up sinner, so disgusting and wretched you can never even be in the presence of God. That's the first thing you have to believe. You then accept that only God can save you and I can only be saved through God, and boom, within 2 or 3 steps, you have a total reliance. You have stripped people of their own self-worth, their own self-confidence. It's gone, and now all they have is God to rely on. It's the perfect scam. How strong does your faith have? So that's the video in question. It's gotten a lot of responses, and one of the main biggest responses that kind of ratioed me even was from this guy who I'm about to debate. This scam saved me from suicide, gave me purpose and a fellowship of believers, by the way. 17,000 likes. Significantly more likes than my original video got. I got ratioed, and I don't care, because being ratioed does not have anything to do with whether or not you're correct. So what I said back to this guy, of course, is that, first of all, I'm happy to hear that something, any kind of belief, saved you from suicide. Obviously, taking your own life is never the right option. It's tragic that that happens to so many people. So many people feel so hopeless that they do this. Okay. However, just if you feel like, now I believe in God, so I don't want to commit suicide, that doesn't mean God is real or correct or true or anything of the sort. If I believe that aliens created me, and that's why I must continue living to fulfill the aliens' holy mission for me, that might save me from suicide. That does not mean that aliens are real.
All right, hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, hear you loud and clear. Me?
Nice, I can hear you loud and clearly also. You are on my stream, just I always let people know.
Yep.
So what's up, man? How you doing today?
Oh, I'm okay. I have to pick up my mother from dialysis a little later, so can't exactly stay forever, you know, but
that's fine. I honestly usually the conversations I have with people, they go for like 30 minutes to like an hour max. So
yeah, that works. That works.
Yeah, so we should be good for time. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I guess I can kind of introduce, I sort of told my stream already, like why we were having this debate exactly and everything. And it really comes down to your tweet.
Yeah.
I already acknowledged it on here. Yeah, you ratioed me. Nice job, by the way. Where you say this scam saved me from suicide, gave me purpose and a fellowship of believers, to which I responded, I'm happy to hear that. That does not mean Christianity is true. If I believe that aliens created me and that pulls me away from being suicidal, that's great, but it doesn't mean aliens are real. Do you have like a response to that? I don't know if you responded on Twitter. I saw that you actually did respond to a couple of my other tweets. I actually didn't see that. So yeah.
Well, in all honesty, you are absolutely correct. That does not have anything to do with whether or not Christianity is true.
Mm-hmm.
What I was responding to was the idea that Christianity is a scam. And I was proving to you that it's not a scam if I'm benefiting from it. So,
but benefiting from something doesn't mean it's not a scam. So like, for example, if somebody was involved in a pyramid scheme and they felt so much self-confidence and so happy about themselves that they were finally working and putting in the hours to make enough money or doing the job that they finally knew they would excel at or knocking on doors, all this stuff. They could be really happy about that. Still doesn't mean that it's not a scam.
I understand that. I understand that. However, what I'm saying is that if what a scam, the word scam implies that you're being cheated out of something.
Hmm.
What am I being cheated out of? Like,
I don't think that
how am I?
Christianity has a strong logical basis or foundation. I think you're being cheated out of living your life to the fullest extent because Christianity carries with it a lot of rules, restrictions, and regulations. And so that means that you, even if it's purely out of even fear of going to hell, you're going to be giving up certain things. Maybe it's just something simple like, you know what? God doesn't like it when I drink on the weekends. But if God isn't real, you've given up a fun part of your life, your existence, for nothing.
Well, I think you're assuming that I don't want to give up those things, as if it's not something that I actively want.
The
Like
reason
I
you
actively
actively
don't.
want those things, though, is because you think God has called you to do that, no?
No, I actively don't want something that I consider to be sinful or harmful. More specifically, harmful, I guess, because you don't really believe in sin. So more harmful to me and other people and society at large. So I don't want to actively engage in activities that I don't think are good.
So if it
Like
does a
that's
harm, then it's bad.
no, no, no. What's good and bad is defined by the moral law of God. So uh, it's not a matter of harm. However, that is a good way to find out what's right or wrong, but that's not a good indication of why something's right or wrong.
Sure. Did you watch my I don't know if you tuned in at all last night. Last night I debated Aspiring Philosophy, or not debated him. Sorry, I had a conversation with him. I don't know if you saw that or
Only
not.
like 5 minutes. I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
have
no, no, no. It's
time.
totally fine. I want to make sure that I'm not like, saying like the same thing if you're like I've already heard you say that. Like, come on.
Right.
But I'm trying to think really like how to kind of navigate this. Could you say the last part of your what you were saying before again, please?
Well, you were talking about me defining right and wrong as like harm. I don't
Right.
necessarily do that. What I'm saying is that right and wrong is a standard outside of anybody's opinion. It's what I consider good is definitionally God's standard. The standard of good is defined by God.
Right.
So,
So my problem with that
in-
is that you're falling into divine command theory, um, which in my opinion is incredibly damaging. That would
how
mean,
so?
because that would mean in theory that if you truly felt or believed that God called you to kill a bunch of people, what you were doing would then be moral. If God is the one who dictates morality, God could decide one day that murdering children is moral. And then that would
Well,
be
I mean, he
moral. Is
does
that
it,
is that
and
correct?
well, first of all, he doesn't command that.
He did in the Bible.
I guess I'm sorry, what?
God did he did command that in the Bible in the Old Testament when he commanded the Israelites to murder the nursing infants, the Amalekites.
Yes,
So
but
my,
he
my
doesn't
issue with
just
what you're
kill. He
saying right
doesn't
now is
want
that
to
God is
kill.
the one that speaks morality into existence, or God is the one that determines morality. That means if God
Yeah.
says, go murder these, go blow up this daycare, that would be moral then, if God actually said it.
Well, first of all, he doesn't say that with regards to the New Testament law, like or a law. I say law. He doesn't. There's no command of Jesus Christ or anything in the New Testament that applies to that. What you're referring to is Old Testament law, or the God commanding the Israelites because he was the God of a nation.
Is God the
And
same
so
today?
we. I'm sorry. What?
Go ahead.
I'm saying back then, God was the head of a nation. He was the God of a nation. And nations do have to do things like war and, you know, they have to defend themselves. They have to sometimes if he demands to he promises to bring them to the promised land or
Sure,
whatever, Israel.
that's fine, but like, there's two things. So
My point
Hebrews
is
13. Well, hold on. My
Christianity.
point is that Hebrews 13:8 says God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So the God
Yes.
of the yes, so the God of the Old Testament, who commanded his people to murder infants, and the God of the Old Testament, who, by the way, literally gave Moses explicit commands to divide the virgin women amongst themselves to keep for themselves. So God was okay with raping people. God was okay with all these things. The same God. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. I don't care if it's the New Testament or the Old Testament. My issue is that what you're appealing to is that if God says something, it is moral. That would mean that in the Bible, in the Old Testament, when God did tell them to rape those women or to murder those children, that was moral. Do you disagree with this?
I fundamentally disagree.
Hold on. You're like really, really quiet all of a sudden.
Do you hear me now?
Now I hear you clear and consistent.
Okay.
Sorry about
Sorry
that.
about that. Okay. I fundamentally disagree with the notion that God commanded to rape women. Like, no, you want to say he commanded them to take virgin women or whatever. That doesn't mean he raped them, or that doesn't mean that he tells them to rape those women. I fundamentally disagree with that. Regardless,
so Numbers 3.
I still want to stress the point that whether or not you think that's wrong, like, I agree. However, I can't say that that's wrong unless I appeal to an objective standard outside myself. So why do you even think that that's wrong if it's basically just your opinion?
If we want to get super caught up in the semantics almost here, that's fine. I will correct what I said prior. Sure. If maybe me saying God commanded is a little bit far or a little bit hyperbolic. What I was referencing is Numbers 31. I'm reading from the NIV version. That's just what popped up on Google. Numbers 31, verse 25. The Lord said to Moses, you, Eleazar and the priest and the family heads of the community are to count all the people and animals that were captured. Let's see. Okay, right here. The plunder remaining from the spoils that the soldiers took was 675,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, and 32,000 women who had never slept with a man. Moses gave the tribute to Eleazar the priest as the Lord's part, as the Lord commanded Moses. The half belonging to the Israelites, which Moses set apart from that, the community's half, was 16,000 people. What does that mean to give half of the people a woman who has never slept with a man? What does that sound like? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand what they're getting at here, dude.
That some would be raped, that doesn't mean that he's commanding them to be raped.
I already said, even if I went ahead and said maybe that was a bit hyperbolic, God still gave specific instructions as to how to divide people. Besides, we don't even need to get caught up in that. We can look at the Leviticus.
Well, God gave instructions to the Israelites to do many things that they didn't,
including slavery.
No, okay.
You've probably heard me bring that one up a lot.
Okay, first of all, when it comes to slavery, God literally freed the Israelites from slavery.
Only to then
Egypt.
tell them that they can get slaves themselves afterwards, yeah?
Well, there's a difference between chattel slavery, where you own someone as an object, versus owning the labor of somebody.
How familiar are you with my content? It's fine if you've never even seen anything. I don't care. I'm just...
I don't know anything about your content, really. I've only randomly...
Sorry, you're muffled again.
Okay.
Okay, see, now you sound louder again. What happened?
I don't know. I genuinely have no idea what's happening. Can you hear me now? Can we just continue now?
Yeah, let's continue here because I can hear you clearly now. Go ahead. What were you saying before? Oh, yeah, that's right. You said you didn't really see too much of my content. You saw it on the clip on Twitter.
Correct.
Yeah, and so the reason I ask that is because a lot of the arguments you're making are the exact arguments that I've dealt with for a very long time, which is part of the reason why you see so much hostility on my end towards Christians. So I never said that slavery or the slavery that God said was okay was the same as chattel slavery. It doesn't have to be. It's still owning another human being as property, which is immoral. So this is my problem, is I'm fine if God or the belief in God helped you personally get to a better place with your mental health, that I'm very happy to hear, genuinely. I'm not trying to like take that away. It's that God is supposed to be the arbiter of morality, but yet he has deliberately condoned things that are immoral.
Well, I would disagree with the idea that uh, owning someone's labor, like, do you say that like owning a sports team is immoral? Because it's similar to that.
No. God said you can keep them as your property. You can bequeath them to your children as your property, and they will be slaves for life. In Exodus, God also says, if the master beats his slave and the slave recovers in a day or two, it's no big deal. But if the slave dies, well, then the master might need to get punished. So God was even okay with beating slaves.
I would say probably if they, like, I don't know the specific verses that you're calling towards.
Okay, it's Leviticus
My point is,
25:44. Here, you want to...
well, regardless, my point is that you can't really say that anything is immoral if you don't have a standard outside yourself. So
I can, because how come I'm able to say slavery is immoral?
I can say that slavery is immoral. I do say that slavery is immoral.
Where are you getting
Like,
that
what?
from?
Because the Bible straight up says in the New Testament specifically, because what you're referring to is Old Testament law.
I'm not
trying
saying
to deal
Christian.
with.
Yeah, I understand this. I'm not saying Christians
trying.
nowadays are going to go get slaves. I'm saying if God is the same today, yesterday, and tomorrow, forever, the same God that sent his son to die for all of us is also the same God that said it was okay to own human beings that were supposedly created in his image as property.
Well, I think you're misrepresenting the idea of what's actually being discussed in those chapters, because it's not about slave like owning slaves in the same way that uh, like black people were enslaved in the U.S.
I get this, and look,
Uh,
I'm trying really hard to be nice because your tweet wasn't like, this whole conversation happened because you disagreed with me, but you were never rude or anything or said anything like inflammatory. I'm trying to be nice, but what you're saying right now is like so fucking stupid. I'm having a hard time like containing or continuing being nice to you. Do you understand what I mean? So I'm not saying it doesn't have to be the same as chattel slavery. Okay? Just forget about chattel slavery completely. That has nothing to do with this. I don't care if it's the nicest, most cushy version of slavery in the world. It's still God's deliberate words. You can read it at the beginning. It says God said to Moses. So it's God deliberately saying, from the nations around you, you may buy slaves. They will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children. They will become your property for life. Owning another human being as property is immoral. I can say this because I personally don't want to be a slave, because I personally don't want to live in a world in which slavery is even a possibility for me. However, you are saying it's wrong because the Bible, even though God specifically said it was actually okay.
Well, first of all, Jesus Christ and all of the apostles, all the disciples, they were not in any way, shape, or form supporting slavery. The New Testament does not support slavery at all. What you're describing with slavery, I fundamentally disagree. What you're saying that I know it's bad just to even own somebody's.
Are you going to get up here on my stream live right here and say it's not bad to own people as property?
No. I'm saying, no, I'm not saying that slavery is bad. What I'm saying is that, quote unquote, owning somebody's labor, aka just the rights to people working, it's not much different than employment. It's just you're basically
Okay, but
employed.
that's not what this is, because in my employment, I get to go home. I get to have children. I get to get paid for my labor, and I don't get beaten. In the Bible, it deliberately says that if the master gives a slave a wife, and the slave has a child with his wife, and then that slave is set free, the wife and the child still are the property of the master. So it is not the same as employment. It is a barbaric way to rule over other people as property. And I have a really hard time with certain biblical verses where God has a big problem with gay people or something, even though being gay does nothing harmful. But then all of a sudden, God is fine with slavery in certain contexts. This doesn't make any sense.
Barbaric time. Like a lot of things that
It was also
God said that
barbaric time and very common to kill people, in which God said, "Thou shalt not murder." Why couldn't God say, "Thou shalt not own human beings as property"?
I don't know why he specifically didn't say that. Regardless, I mean, he says to love your neighbor as yourself. So it's like I don't.
Okay, let me read you the New Testament verse, okay? 1 Peter 2:18, New Testament, right?
Okay.
It instructs slaves to submit to their masters in reverent fear of God, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. So the New Testament says, hey, if you're a slave and your master is beating the fuck out of you, maybe raping you too, don't worry about it, okay? Just keep on being respectful towards them. Like, do you understand some of my issues here where, again, I'm not even out, like, listen, I'm not trying to even argue with you about your initial tweet. If Christianity has brought you a sense of comfort and peace and has helped your mental health, I am happy for you, sincerely. I know that I might not sound serious, but I really am. I don't have a problem with that. My issue, though, is that I am hostile towards Christians on Twitter, as you've seen. This is why. Because you guys don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Well, you know, I will admit that I'm not the most well versed when it comes to the Bible. I literally just I just came back to Christianity.
Okay, well then
Couple
maybe,
months
yeah, like
ago.
maybe it doesn't even need to be
So
like
I will
this kind of a discussion,
100%
but like,
admit that I'm not that well versed when it comes. You're pulling out Bible verses here. I'm not the most well versed with the Bible.
well then let's talk a
That.
little bit about. Okay, well, I appreciate that. Sorry, I don't mean to keep cutting you off. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's okay.
Let's steer the conversation then a little bit away from like because I understand that the hostile debate thing isn't really that productive. So I did see something on your Twitter. You said something that you used to be a Christian and that you
Yeah.
walked away from Christianity. Now you, like you just said,
Yes.
you came back to. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I was raised heavily Christian, fundamentalist Christian.
Yeah.
And I think that's why to this day I still have like a good understanding, at least of the Bible on the surface.
Right. Well, you know, it's been 10 years that I have read the Bible from front to back. I grew up in a Southern Baptist denomination, you know, the church, but I was more lukewarm. I would just casually go to church here and there. But in about 2014, a friend of mine invited me to his church, and it was an Assembly of God Pentecostal, very charismatic, very radical. And I was very devout. I got really into Christianity at that point, but then life circumstances happened, and I'm not going to go into all of that. But it's just I felt that God had abandoned me, and so I abandoned God, and I abandoned God for 10 years, and I've just recently recommitted my life to Christ, and you know I feel like I've had so many blessings, especially on social media. People so much support around me, and it's I was in a really dark place, but you know what? God brought me back.
Which, yeah, like I said, I'm really glad to hear that, of course. And like I mean, my parents are Christian still, and although I was raised super fundamentalist or whatever, like my Christians have, or my parents have totally loosened up on things. They're much more like relaxed now, and I commonly use my parents as an example as people that I think really exemplify the Christian love and generosity without the harsh judgment and everything. Like how my upbringing was, they've really changed and got for the better. So this isn't like no means like me like bashing on them or whatever. I've even, like I said, so I've referenced my parents before as people that are like, they're good Christians too, of course. I don't think all Christians are evil or psycho or whatever. What was it exactly that made you come back to God?
Well, like I said, I was in a very dark place. I was very suicidal, and um, you know, I started talking to other Christian people,
Hmm.
and I I don't know. It felt like there were so many signs and messages that like it's hard to even put into words.
Hmm.
Things that like I would be thinking about, like worrying about something uh, very specific, and then suddenly a Bible verse that addresses exactly my concern just pops up in like my Twitter feed, like
Hmm.
stuff like that. And I started praying to God. I was like, "Look, I don't even know whether you exist. Um, I don't know whether this will be even a waste of time. I don't know what I'm doing."
Hmm.
But I was soul searching because, especially with the afterlife, because I was very much contemplating suicide, and suddenly I get so much love and support on Twitter. I get so many people reaching out to me just randomly talking about God, and I feel like it really changed my life for the better. And that's when I knew it was like, okay,
Hmm.
I know that I was wrong to abandon this 10 years ago because
Right.
my
And like
life's
I
been
said
so
too,
much
like,
better.
yeah, which, like I said, like I've been saying, I'm happy to hear that. And my goal is not to be like, you should not be a Christian anymore or anything. Of course, if it's bringing you like joy or whatever. But have you ever heard, just out of curiosity, have you ever heard of the term uh, apophenia?
No.
So, apophenia is a term used to describe the human tendency to perceive patterns or connections in random or unrelated data, even if there are none. So, a good example would be, okay. A good example would be when I was younger, I got a new car. I got a Ford Fusion, and I was really psyched up about it. And then all of a sudden, everywhere I was looking, there's a Ford Fusion on the road. And I remember thinking, like, am I like a trendsetter? What? Like, what's going on? I just got this car. Now, everywhere I look, there's a Ford Fusion on the road that looks just like mine. It's because once you've introduced a concept to your mind, you will then start to see that concept popping up literally everywhere. So it says, even here, like on the basic definition, people with apophenia may see faces in clouds, lines, or natural features. They may believe that coincidences or reoccurring symbols are messages from the universe, God, angels, or ancestors. And so that doesn't mean, that doesn't mean like you're mentally ill or anything either, by the way. It's actually every human has a degree of apophenia. Like I just said, I've even had this before. So I understand it. It's that, like, let's say you are struggling maybe with feeling like, let's just add a example. Maybe you're struggling because like your financial situation's rough, okay? Now all of a sudden, it feels like every time you load up TikTok or your phone or you turn on the radio, something is being said about finances. Is this a sign from God? No, it's actually that because you are currently struggling in that regard, anytime anything about finances pops up, it resonates with you. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. At the same time, like I can't I can't go into the details, but I know that it was way too specific. Like
Mhm.
my experiences were way too specific that it doesn't even go to it's not what you're describing, in my
Do
opinion.
you have any obviously you don't need to share anything private or personal or anything, but do you have any like examples or like a what do you mean when it was really specific?
Let me get give me just 1 second to look this up. I saved it.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Okay, here. right before I came on stream, while I was scrolling through Twitter, the very first this Bible verse just popped on my feed, and it was the first time this verse ever even popped on my feed at all. Right here it says Exodus 4:12. Now go, I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you what to say. Like that right here, right before I go on stream, that kind of tells me like, okay, God's with me.
Right. When I hear that, so like I completely understand where you're coming from actually, because like I said, I mean, I was raised Christian. I even had like an app that would give me like a Bible verse of the day, and the same thing seemed to happen to me. The Bible verse would like seem to apply almost. There's a couple different things. One, make sure you're not going about that backwards. So like if you any other day were not going to get on my stream and that verse popped up, you probably wouldn't think much of it. But again, because debate, going on stream, all this stuff, forefront of your mind, this is now something that resonates more with you, that sticks out to you, and it may have not previously. So I would be careful that it's not like a backwards thing. And then the other thing, like I said, not even apophenia, but just general human psychology. The human brain is so set up to detect patterns that humans across the board struggle with conspiracy theorists and stuff, or conspiracy theories and things like this, because the human cognition makes so many connections, even when they're not actually really a connection. Like when you tell me that, in my mind, I hear, all right, you're probably following a bunch of Bible verse pages or Christian pages or something. So like the odds of a verse or a Bible related thing popping up on the top of your feed, that's completely expected. Then the fact that it would be about something that could kind of relate to the debate, that's also to be expected, because your brain will make a pattern or a connection even if there was none.
I mean, that specific verse has not popped up at all, and I've seen so many other verses just repeat and repeat and repeat. But I understand what you're saying.
I'm gonna look this up a little bit more in regards to God and whatnot, and see like how this.
I understand what you're saying, and I will absolutely take it into consideration. Of being
like
a little
I said,
more
my
skeptical.
my goal of this conversation, I didn't go in here with a goal of like, I'm gonna make this guy be not a Christian anymore. I don't care if it brings you joy and peace, and if it's not affecting you to act in, or it's not causing you to act in ways that I would deem like bigoted, which would be like, I'm gonna vote anti-gay because God or something like that. I don't really have much of an issue. So like my goal isn't necessarily to it's more to just kind of understand where you're coming from, your thinking, I guess, and to see like, I mean, I wanted to, of course, start off with just presenting you with my argument I made on Twitter, just to kind of hear what you had to say about that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I have absolutely no hatred or antagonistic feelings towards you or atheists or anyone who doesn't agree with me. It's like that's fine. I was literally in the same boat as you for 10 years, so it's like I understand where you're coming from. I just,
but see, do you really feel like you were in? And I'm not trying to get all weird and be like, well, I'm different, blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't actually know if we are in the same boat exactly, because for example, like I've had plenty of Christians reach out to me and be incredibly kind. I've gone through a time a couple years ago that I haven't really even talked about much, where I was literally on the brink of suicide also. I was looking up ways to kill myself. I almost had to be like institutionalized. It was really, really severe. Christians reached out to me. Yeah, like Christians reached out to me then too. And Christians were nice and kind and everything. But I guess for me, it's like, they can be as nice, they can be the nicest people in the fucking world. It doesn't change the fact that I think that the fundamental beliefs they hold are intrinsically flawed. So of course I wouldn't be mean to that person. If someone's offering me support or whatever, God loves you or something, I wouldn't like just start like cussing that person out or something. But right. At the end of the day, I feel like you may have been swayed by the niceness of Christians, and a lot of Christians, unfortunately, they even give off this facade of niceness. I've been dealing with a lot of specific Christians that I've been responding to on YouTube and whatnot, that give off this like appearance that they're really nice and kind and understanding, but then what they're actually saying is some of the most twisted shit that I've ever heard.
Well, okay, I want to be clear. I want to be crystal clear here. If I don't want you to come walk away with this thinking that I support slavery or
No,
any
I don't think
or
that.
rape or anything like that. I absolutely do not
I
support.
do not think you. Don't worry. I don't think you.
All right.
I don't think that you support those
I
things. At all.
also I don't know. I'll be the first to admit I'm not the most well versed with with everything the Bible says. All right.
Mm-hmm.
You clearly know a lot more of the Bible than me, so I'll admit that. At the same time, I also want to say that why I believe in God, I believe that God exists, specifically just because I think that it's just the most likely outcome. You know, I think that's the most likely option. But the reason why I became a Christian and the reason why I started to believe in Him is because of, like I said, a lot of the signs, a lot of people. A lot of Christians reaching out to me, a lot of blessings that came from Christian, a lot of Christians and the Christian faith. And so
yeah,
there's like this dualism in which it's like, I believe that God exists because I just think that it's the most likely explanation for why the universe exists and everything exists. But the reason why I believe in Christianity is because I truly believe, one, that Jesus died for our sins. He rose from the dead, but also just so many signs and so many Christians reaching out to me recently, and so many blessings that came into my life because of it. So I know that you will still think that it's an unreasonable position. I know that you'll disagree with me. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I respect your position. I'm just saying. For me, like this is the reason why I've come to the faith.
Sure. And honestly, I think we definitely should kind of like wrap the conversation up here on a respectful note.
Right. Okay.
I would just encourage you at the end of the day to look up the fallacy of ignorance. I know that sounds harsh, but it's not like calling you stupid or anything. It's just the fallacy of ignorance. It's known as the appeal to ignorance or argument from ignorance. It's a logical fallacy that occurs when someone assumes a claim is true because there's no evidence against it. So when you say like, I feel like God is the most likely explanation, that's kind of what that reminds me of. An example they even gave there are ghosts in our attic because no one has been able to prove there aren't. That would be a fallacy. So I'm not trying to like get into a new discussion about this. I would just kind of encourage you to look this up a little bit. Sounds a little bit like what you might be falling into with Christian faith stuff. But like I said, at the end of the day, I'm happy ending the conversation here on a respectful note. And if Christianity brings you joy and peace, I have nothing against it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I've had a really good discussion with you. I was honestly expecting a lot more heat. I'm glad that you were very kind and respectful. And so thank you for that.
No problem. Yeah, I know I can get pretty like, I do sort of like shit post on Twitter a little bit. So I get pretty hostile on there. But I think that's why a lot of people think that I'm going to be super like just obnoxious and vicious on. But usually when it's a conversation, obviously I try to be a little bit more accommodating and hear people out and stuff. So yeah.
Right. Well, thank you.
No problem. Well, thanks for the conversation. And if you ever want to talk again, you know where to find me.
All right. Thank you.
See you later.
Bye-bye.